people who have had a stalker. What was the craziest or scariest thing that happened? Story 1. I went on 3 dates with a guy but didn't quite feel a connection. I tried to let him down gently, as he hadn't had a girlfriend before. I was happy to remain friends. He was a friendly guy, I just wasn't attracted to him. This was around May. I learned a few lessons from that experience. He added me on Facebook, which was fine, since we had sometimes communicated through there. About a month later, he turned up at my house unannounced, saying he was in the area. He actually lived 45 minutes away and had decided to go shopping in my town. I wasn't home at the time. My brother messaged me to let me know, and then the guy messaged me too. I apologized and said I was out and wouldn't be home for several hours. That was fine. He went home. He had picked me up from my house for the 3rd date. A few weeks later, I had accepted a Facebook event invitation to a car show my mechanic was hosting. The guy turned up at the event while I was there with my brother and some friends, and I didn't really know what to do. My brother kept him entertained, and I managed to exchange pleasantries, but I stayed with my friends. I went for lunch with my friends, and when I got home, I found out that he had gone to my house again. This time, he had left some chocolates, a towel with my name embroidered on it, and a letter. In the letter, he explained that he was in love with me, wanted to have children with me, get married, and buy a house together. Oh, and the towel was so I could think about him when I dried myself with it. Again, I turned him down because I simply wasn't into him. A few months later, I was seeing someone else, and he was over at my house. The guy turned up again, unannounced, trying to get hold of me. Why didn't he just message or call? Luckily, my brother knew I had the new guy over and told him I wasn't home. I had to explain to him in a message that if he wanted to see me, he needed to contact me first, not just turn up unannounced and expect me to be available. It made it much harder to want to remain friends, as his behavior was becoming overbearing, and I didn't know what he might try next. So, I had to cut him off. He tried contacting me through several methods, even changed his number and pretended to be someone else. He finally stopped after 1.5 years. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. It was my ex. When we broke up, it was all very dramatic, and he got on a bus across the country the same day for whatever reason, and sent a long message from the bus ending with "This is not goodbye." I said, "Yes, it is. Good luck." 2 years later, I met my now husband, and I suppose he moved back after 3 years. I started seeing him everywhere. He followed the two of us around Walmart for 45 minutes, until I just posted up near a security guard and slipped out as he tried to wait for me to get away from the security guard. Then I saw him wandering around near my mother's house, but I had at that point moved in with my husband. Then I saw him outside my work. He was clearly trying to get the courage to come in, and he was also very clearly high. Some of the regular police officers came in by chance for their coffee, and he left when they arrived. Then he figured out the general location where I was living, and I saw him sort of wandering around a few times. I didn't go home when I saw him. I went and sat in a public place for a few hours. Then I changed places of work, and I saw him outside about 3 times. I was near a major transportation hub, so I tried to ignore it. But when he started doing the pacing/tweaking/chain smoking thing again, I figured I ought do something. So I waited for a family friend I knew would be in, who was pretty domineering, and I knew would go to bat for me, and let him know who it was and what he was doing. He went outside and told my ex off, I suppose, and scared him, I guess, because he left quite quickly. My family friend was a bus driver, so I gave him a picture, and he shared it with some drivers along my regular route, and as long as I stuck to that route, the few more times I saw him trying to get on my bus, we drove right past him, or the wrong door opened to let people off and not let him on. We finally moved again, and I quit my job because I had been bouncing around the same chain and was easy to find. Since then, I have seen him once, but he didn't see me, and I think it was unrelated because he actually bought something. I just sat in the camera room and watched till he left. It's been an additional 5 years now, so I assume he has figured himself out. I got an air of doom every time I saw him. He was kind when we dated, never abusive, but he was anti-drugs and anti-smoking, and so seeing him high and things like that set off alarm bells. I know he was not well when he returned. I don't know what would have happened had he gotten close to me. Maybe nothing, but every bone in my body was screaming danger. So I trusted my gut and took steps to maintain distance. And I was okay. The police wouldn't have done anything. No threats were uttered, and we were always in public. But all in all, it turned out okay. Story 3. I had a stalker in high school, and he didn't make it a secret. We were friends at first, kind of talking romantically, but I was very shy when it came to relationships or being physical. We had never even kissed before when he asked if he could send a song he wrote about me. It made me very uncomfortable, and I asked him not to send it, but he did anyway. I expressed my discomfort and tried to continue the friendship, but it was just not working because he would still write me poems and send me weird songs. He started following me to my classes even though he was on the other side of school, but he wouldn't speak to me at all. It was insanely uncomfortable. This continued for weeks. He started sending me mean messages anonymously online and sending me songs with scary titles. He sent me Smith's song, "The More You Ignore Me, the Closer I Get," every single day, sometimes multiple times. Then one day at lunch, he gave me a handwritten poem, and I can't remember what all it said, but the end was something about how he wanted to watch me get eaten alive by sharks. Well, friends, I had told him sharks were my biggest fear. I showed my teacher the poem, and she freaked out and took it to the guidance counselor. She knew all the previous incidents, so the letter made her worried, especially how his handwriting changed when he was writing about me dying. I ended up getting called into a meeting with the principal, a guidance counselor, and the teacher I told. They even called my mom in, and we all sat down and talked about what would be the best thing to do. The principal was really nervous he would do something crazy, so he said I should just avoid him as much as possible and be polite anytime we may interact. Basically, how I was already handling it. I am not sure if they ever spoke to him about it, but the last interaction I had with him still creeps me out to think about. I was up very late and received a text from him. "Why are you up so late? You should get ready for bed." He had been to my place once before, and I lived very close to the school. I'll always wonder if he was outside my house that night. Story 4. Last year, my girlfriend had been receiving emails, texts, and DMs from a no-name account, asking intrusive and strange questions like, "Are you in an open relationship?" along with random explicitly intimate stuff. She simply blocked the account and moved on. To my surprise, this is apparently very normal for women, and it frigging sucks. One time we were in a mall, and she noticed a lanky guy following us. As usual, I was oblivious. She mentioned to me that she thought it was the guy who had been harassing her for weeks. We left, and that night she received an email on her business account saying her boyfriend was cheating on her and flirting with other girls on Goodreads. The message asked how that made her feel and said that if she wanted to know more, she could meet him at a park where we had spent a lot of time together. She then realized he lived in our area and had all her information. She stopped going for runs at night, stopped shopping by herself, locked down every account, and wouldn't leave the house alone. She was just angry. I was angry too. I ended up looking the guy up and realized that we had a mutual friend, an actor I had filmed a commercial with. I sent her a message asking if she knew the guy and explained the situation. I saw that she had read it but didn't respond. For a few months, my girlfriend didn't hear anything from him, and we decided it was over. Then I got a message from the actor. Apparently she did know the stalker. It was her ex-boyfriend. They had been in an abusive relationship, and he had been extremely jealous. I guessed he focused on me because my girlfriend and I used to recommend each other books on Goodreads. He had decided to get even with me by stalking her. The actor was embarrassed and said things like, "I understand if you never want to talk to me again," which just broke my heart. We offered to help her, but she said she had a restraining order and that it was fine. She had contacted him and he said he would stop and never reach out to us again. We thought we were fine, that it was over. Then, one day, he sent me a long Instagram DM trying to explain his behavior and saying that he wanted to talk. I ignored it. He kept sending messages. I kept ignoring them. I think he's done now, but I'll never forgive him for making my partner feel incredibly unsafe for an entire year. Story 5. I saw him soloing off near the window. Long story short, my husband and I moved into our new home. The guy living directly behind us was acting strange, just weird in the window. Turns out, he was soloing off. Then he stalked me online, got my number, and told me this was basically God's plan. He said he had prayed for a beautiful woman, and here I was, told me my kids were going to be his. It was wild. Story 6. I worked as a secretary at an adult school when I was 18. An adult student kept bothering me, taking pictures of me outside the office and so on. I ended up quitting that job and got him banned from the school. Fast forward 3 years, I was in a relationship, 6 months pregnant, and working at a drag reduction system office. A police officer showed up one day and told me I'd had a private investigator on me for a few weeks. Turns out, the investigator reported his own client to the police because the guy had claimed to be my husband, but after following me, the PI realized he wasn't, and that he was stalking me. The guy went to jail for a few days, and I never heard from him again. It's been 19 years. Freaky buns crap. Story 7. I was stalked by a guy I went to high school with. He was the kid everyone thought would shoot up our school if he could. Everybody would pick on him and make fun of him for being a loser, but I never did. His mom was a teacher at our school and I loved her, so I never wanted to upset her by being mean to her son. I guess he took my niceness as me having a crush on him and he became obsessed with me. He would stick love notes in my locker all the time and he made it a point to come visit his mom's class when he knew I'd be in there. I was her teacher's assistant. Because I was so close with his mom, I never talked to her about it because I didn't want it to be awkward. I was never actually scared of this guy until he started coming to my house in the middle of the night. My dad worked swing shift, and he would be gone a lot at night. This guy would sneak out of his house late at night and come knock on my window or creep around my house. I had to call the cops a couple of times, and at that point, I decided I had to talk to his mom. His parents were super apologetic and said they'd take care of it, but he still wouldn't leave me alone. I got married young and moved away from my hometown and didn't think I'd ever have to see him again. One day he sent me a friend request on MySpace and sent this big long message saying how sorry he was for ever making me feel scared or uncomfortable, so I decided to accept his request. I thought maybe he's actually grown up and changed. At first he seemed like he genuinely just wanted to be friends, but then he started leaving creepy comments on pictures of me and my kids. The final straw was when his wife messaged me and told me to leave her husband alone. She told me that she knew I was in love with him and that I needed to stop messaging him. Apparently, this is what he told her when she caught him creeping on my pictures. I showed her screenshots of the messages he had sent me and the comments on my pictures and blocked them both. He has tried to friend me 3 times from different profiles on Facebook and I've had to block all of them. I hope to hell I never see him again. Story 8. He offered to bring me home after the club. I thought it was nice. But then, he knew where I lived. For the next 3 months, he was always there when I left my house. He was suddenly on the campus when he studied somewhere else. A few times a week, he would be standing and waiting in front of my door, asking the neighbors for my spare keys because he was my boyfriend and he locked himself out. Fortunately, they didn't believe him. He left letters, roses, coffee, and one day a knife. A lot of times when he was waiting in front of my door, I would be sitting in my apartment in silence, hoping that he didn't hear me, and would leave soon. He was sometimes there until 3 a.m. I of course blocked him from the beginning, told him many times to leave. He said that he could hear our babies, and I would rob us of our future together. I talked to the police. They couldn't do anything because he didn't break a law. One day he called from a different number. My friend picked up and just screamed at him to leave me alone. And then he did. He wasn't in front of my door anymore, not on campus, not in the supermarket, just gone. But still today, I get panic attacks if I see a man with his body type and brown curly hair in the corner of my eye. Story 9. I've been stalked by several guys, but the scariest was my ex. He would wait outside my apartment in his car. If I wasn't there, he'd be at my work waiting in the parking lot. He called me at random times from different numbers. He threatened my friends, asking them where I was. Since I didn't have social media, he contacted my friends through their accounts. He even threatened a neighbor and almost broke down my door. My landlord ended my lease early because he feared for my safety. It got to the point where I truly thought he was going to off me. The worst part? 2 weeks after our breakup, he was already with someone else, so he was doing all this while dating another person. It was 3 years of terror. Story 10. I had a stalker when I was about 16, 17 years old. They somehow got a hold of my number and would text me at all hours of the day. Sometimes just to let me know they knew when I had people over or tell me that I am coming home awfully late. They would also tell me of all the other times they saw me throughout the day. I would block the number, and they would just keep using new numbers to text me on. I ended up filing a police report, but never got anything out of it. Cops even had the nerve to joke around and say, "It's because you're pretty, you should be flattered." Found out it was a childhood friend's father, posted him publicly on social media with photos that put things to an end. Story 11. When I was around 15 or 16, I was new in town, living alone in my uncle's house, without much parental support. I had enrolled myself in school, and was trying to figure out where the bus stop was when I saw a group of teenagers walking down the road, with a few others lagging behind. I asked one guy who was walking alone if the bus stop was in that direction, and he said yes. I awkwardly asked if I could walk with him, explaining that I was new. I vaguely remember the bus driver saying, "Oh, there's two of you," when we got on, but I didn't think much of it. On the ride home, that same guy walked just behind me from the bus stop all the way to my street. He didn't try to talk to me or anything, just silently walked about 30 feet behind me. When I got home, I noticed him across the street, sitting on the porch swing of a house. I figured he must be my new neighbor. Then I started noticing the same guy walking behind me from class to class at school. I assumed our schedules must just lined up in a weird way, with most of our classes next to each other. Every day he'd walk behind me. Sometimes, to make it less awkward, I'd say hello and try to make small talk since we were clearly headed in the same direction. But most of the time, he stayed a few feet behind and didn't say a word. Occasionally he'd bring me flowers and hand them to me, still without saying anything. Every afternoon, I'd see him across the street playing with who I assumed were his little brothers for hours. We didn't really know each other. We had probably only spoken a handful of times, even when he gave me gifts. He just was always nearby. During spring break, my best friend from my old town came to visit, and we had a lot of fun together. After he left, the neighbor lady from across the street came over and asked me to tell my boyfriend to stay out of their yard. She said she was uncomfortable with him playing with her son. Assuming she was talking about my male best friend who had just spent the week with me, I told her no problem, though I was confused about when or why he would have gone into her yard or played with her kids. Honestly, I started to think maybe she was just a little off. One night, I was on the phone with my best friend, sitting against the window in my room when I kept hearing the bushes scratching against the glass. Curious, I used my fingers to part the blinds and peek outside, only to see the guy from the bus peering in at me. Startled, I screamed, and he took off running. I quickly got dressed and marched across the street to confront him for being a peeping Tom. When the neighbor lady answered the door, I started going off about her son spying on me, only to find out he wasn't her son at all. The guy who had followed me home every day didn't live there, and he was the one she'd been talking about when she asked me to tell my boyfriend to stay out of her yard and stop playing with her kids. We called the police, and they found him walking several blocks away. We never figured out why he had been walking behind that group of teenagers the first day I saw him, but it turned out he didn't even go to the school. He had followed me onto the bus that morning, and because the driver had been told a new student me was starting, she assumed he must have been my brother or something when he boarded with me. That's why she made the comment about there being two of us. But in reality, he was full-on stalking me. He had been waiting outside my classes just to walk behind me to the next one, and spending the time I was in class at the cemetery next door. That's where he got the flowers. He was robbing graves while I was in math class, then giving them to me as he followed me to science. He wasn't a student at all. Turns out he was a mentally disturbed 19-year-old who lived 5 miles away and had been homeschooled. Our chance encounter led to him stalking me for 7 months. The police told me they believed he was just a harmless kid in love, but his parents agreed to send him off for help. My teachers were notified to be on alert, and campus security was increased for a while. I guess everyone had just assumed he was a new student when they saw him in the halls, and since he'd been homeschooled, no one recognized that he wasn't even high school age. I never saw him again after that. It was pretty wild. Story 12. It started while I was still in high school. He would be in a few of my classes, and we would occasionally see each other around town, a very small rural town. It slowly turned into him showing up at some of my friend groups' hangout spots and saying that I had inspired him to start looking into similar hobbies. We thought it was kinda weird, but just brushed it off and avoided him. Flash forward a couple of weeks into the start of summer vacation. He had found or followed me to all of my favorite places and my work, even though both were sometimes towns over from our own. I would see his car at parks where I did outdoor painting, at my place of work as well as at friends' houses, and he would drive past the house of the family I nannied for during my days on. I thought it was creepy and told local authorities, but they told me not to worry. This went on for the rest of high school and up until graduation. I didn't tell anyone what university I was going to and lied claiming it was 1 hour away from mine. He was accepted and attended there while I left for another. He found out after a semester that I wasn't there and showed up at my dorm hall. Furthermore, he tried to break in and convince me and other people in the building to just let him in. I hid out in another girl's room until my friend was able to pick me up and take me to her boyfriend's off-campus apartment. I found out he was arrested the next morning for essaying a resident assistant. I called and showed them the evidence I had for his persistent stalking and finally filed a restraining order. He just got released a few months ago, and I have never been more nervous. I am just happy my current job and living area has amazing security, and they all have pictures and his information to be safe. I may be paranoid, but better safe than end up on a true crime podcast. Story 13. My wife did, and it became a real problem. He was a maintenance man at the school where she taught. She was throwing out a lot of old damaged books. He asked if he could have them for his kids. Of course. After that, he wanted to always be there wherever my wife was. He was always sweeping or cleaning near her room. Then one day in the winter, my wife got a flat tire right after leaving school. It was getting dark and her new best friend was there to fix it. While changing the tire, he started asking intimate questions, like he wanted to know if she ever had a black man. Of course, she said nothing. It got worse and the school administration was ignoring it. I was now going way out of my way to take her and to pick her up from school. She was scared. Then he said something to her while she was eating in the cafeteria. She lost it. She just started screaming and crying for him to leave her alone. They sent her home for a few days of paid leave. Since the school was no help, I went to see 2 school board members I knew, but not well. I told them that I had hired an attorney and would be suing the school district unless my wife felt safe. They moved the custodian to another school, but it took months before my wife felt safe. The custodian got in trouble at the next school and was arrested. We never heard from him again. Story 14. I have a weird, kind of related story. There's a man in my town who for the last 15 years I've seen constantly almost everywhere I go. He shows up at least 3 times a month. The grocery store, the corner store, the gas station, Walmart, the liquor store. Occasionally we catch each other's eye and give that "you again" look. Maybe laugh it off. It's become a bit of a running joke. I'll come home and tell my husband, "Guess who I saw at the store today?" The only catch? He's always at these places first, so I am the one who looks like the stalker. Story 15. He wasn't subtle about it. He threatened me by phone and email, followed a moving truck to my new apartment, ignored police instructions to stop contacting me multiple times, then contacted me through other people, showed up in random places in my new city. It only stopped after he got arrested for assault on someone else and ultimately moved to a different city, where he was again arrested for assault. That last part I only know because I was regularly looking him up on court records to see if he was free. Story 16. Had this woman who would walk into the store I worked at just to talk to me. After a while I got creeped out and started doing inventory in the back whenever someone spotted her walking in. I swear she looked more like Annie Wilkes than Kathy Bates did. Used to see her standing outside the library, waiting to get in. She would be cheerful but then utter a string of freaking bombs if she felt slighted in any way, still with that cheerful yet dead-eyed look on her face. Story 17. I've never had the threatening stalker, but when I was much younger I did have one of those soft-core stalkers. It was the custodian in my building at work. We had a glass front door and he would lean against it while I was at the front desk. He would watch me as I walked to my car at the end of the day. He didn't ever really speak to me though. One day I entered the building in a skirt, and he was on his hands and knees cleaning the baseboards, which put his head about the same level as my nethers. I passed by him in the hall, giving him as wide a berth as I could, hugging the opposite wall really, when he looked up and said, "Something sure smells good." I bolted to my office suite and said to my boss, "I feel like I need a hug and a shower." My boss, my former mentor, my now dear friend, threw his hands up when I told him what the stalker said, and said, "That's it. I've had it." First he tried to handle things professionally and wrote the property manager, who said that I must have been mistaken, and he was complimenting my perfume, which I didn't wear because another coworker was allergic, and it was a small space. When that didn't work, he decided to patiently lie in wait. Then the next time the stalker went to look for me at the front desk, the boss sat me elsewhere in the office and confronted him. He never told me what he said or how the conversation went, but the stalker quit shortly thereafter. Story 18. Mine was much different from most people's. I met him at church, but later found out he had followed me there. Apparently, he lived a couple houses down from my ex-boyfriend, and this guy showed up at my church within a week of my breakup. He was always wearing an army jacket, so I assumed he was a veteran struggling with severe post-traumatic stress disorder based on the way he acted. I found out later that he actually had a developmental disorder, and the army jacket had belonged to his father. He followed me around church for a while, and, honestly, I didn't think much of it. He seemed harmless. My friends would always joke about it when they saw him looking for me if he lost track of where I was. If I went to the bathroom, he'd be standing outside the door when I came out. This went on for a couple of years. We were always really nice to him. Dumb on our part, but we didn't know any better. We'd even invite him to our cookouts and hangouts, because he could drive and stuff. One night, I was at my friend's house having a girls' night. Her husband and our other friend had gone out, so we could have the place to ourselves. This dude showed up at the front door around midnight, holding a weed whacker. Seriously, can't make this up. When I asked him what he was doing there, he said, "Can I have drugs in the backyard?" I was super confused, because it was the middle of the night, and my friend lived on a big lot. It was pitch black outside. We told him no and asked him to leave, and he did. A couple of weeks later, my friend and I were sitting with him in our church auditorium. It was just the three of us, while we waited for my friend's husband to get out of a meeting. My friend said she needed to use the bathroom and left me alone with him. I didn't really think anything of it. He'd never tried anything before, just tended to be a little too much in my space, so I figured it would be fine for a couple of minutes. The first thing he said was, "You look tense." I replied, "Oh, I am fine," trying to hide the fact that I was already uncomfortable with him saying that. He proceeded to get up, stand behind me, and place his hands on my shoulders to massage them. I was still trying to be polite at that point, saying, "No, I am okay, thanks. Please stop." That's when he really started applying pressure, and I began to panic. I struggled to get out of his grip, but the more I struggled, the harder he grabbed onto my shoulders, and it hurt. Badly. My friend came back at just the right time and yelled at him before pulling him off of me. She started screaming at him, and he left angry. We didn't see or hear from him again after that. Not until a couple of years later, when my friend called me and said he had been arrested. I asked what happened, and she sent me a link to an article. It said the guy had been arrested for stabbing his neighbor's dogs to death. I think only one of the dogs actually died, but the second one almost did. He was suspected in multiple other dog deaths in his neighborhood. He had been arrested, bonded out, and put on an ankle monitor but didn't charge it and went off the grid for 6 hours. When they found him, they discovered dead cats, raccoons, and possums scattered around the block near his house. The article also said he had allegedly set fire to a girl's house after she rejected him, and with another girl he threatened to off her whole family. I feel like my situation with him wasn't nearly as bad as what those other girls went through, but I am still incredibly glad he's in prison now. They're not letting him out early because they've determined he's a danger to society. Story 19. Not sure if this counts, but I'll share anyway. I was repeatedly harassed by my ex after I cut him off. He had cheated on and manipulated me throughout our 3-year relationship, and he couldn't handle not having control over me anymore. After we hashed things out for the last time over text, I blocked him on everything except regular messages, but I stopped responding. He sent me a birthday text, tried to reach out after the girlfriend he had been with while still seeing me broke up with him, commented on my YouTube channel, and even texted me from a new number. This went on for a while. 2 months later, I got a text from my dad. The guy had shown up at our front door at 11 at night while I was at work, saying he wanted to talk to me. I freaked out, panicked a bit in the car, then drove straight home. As I was walking up the driveway, my dad was already waiting at the door. My ex-car suddenly stopped in the middle of the road when he spotted me. I ran inside while he parked and came up to the door again. My dad answered and told him to leave. It had taken me 20 to 25 minutes to get home. He had waited, circling around my house. Yikes. And about a month after that, he made a pickup order at the store I work at. I ended up packing his order. It scared the crap out of me, because during the holidays I also help with order pickups and stockroom operations. If I'd been working the front that day, I probably would have had to hand it to him myself. A few weeks ago, he sent me a letter going on about what a good person I am, how much he's changed, how he misses me, but most importantly, how he never cheated on me, and that everyone who says otherwise, yes, there are witnesses, is a liar. My current boyfriend texted him, telling him to leave me alone. My ex blew up at him, accusing him of manipulating me and claiming I was in a bad mindset and that everyone around me was feeding me terrible lies about cheating and gaslighting. The ironic part? He crap talks me to our mutual friends, saying I ruined his life and calling me a terrible manipulative idiot. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he has an alt account and is still trying to keep tabs on me. But yeah, that's where I am at. The guy has serious anger issues and lying problems, but I don't think I can get a restraining order or anything because he hasn't made any direct threats against my life that I know of, and honestly, I'd rather not see his face again. My dad says, if there's any more contact, he's going to call his mother, but I wish he had done that the night my ex showed up at the house. I am still terrified to come home at night, or even walk downstairs after dark. I don't feel safe in my own home. But there's not much I can really do. If I take any action, I worry it'll just set him off. I do have a plan. If we run into each other in public, he'll probably run right up to me. But I think, or at least hope, he's done putting any effort into this. It's not the most intense stalking situation it could be, and there's a lot more context than just I have a stalker. I am just taking the opportunity to share and vent. Story 20. When I was 16, there was this weird dude who kept calling my house. One day, my 13-year-old sister answered the landline. A man started asking her questions, her name, age, and so on. She thought it was one of her friends messing around and didn't think much of it. Later that day, my mum answered the phone to the same guy asking for the girl. He went on to call about 50 times a day from 3 different London landlines. He never spoke to my sister again after the first time, but he always asked for her. When my dad spoke to him, the guy was vulgar and threatening. In the end, we had to pay to have all 3 of the numbers blocked for about 6 months. The police didn't care. If I recall correctly, it was because he was calling from hundreds of miles away. Even though I never spoke to him, it was so unsettling hearing the phone ring non-stop. I think we unplugged it a lot before finally getting him blocked. We have no idea who he was or why he harassed us like that. I imagine maybe he just spent all day calling random numbers until someone answered. Story 21. I knew because he used to be my friend and kept trying to call, text, or message me non-stop after I stopped being friends with him. He also claimed he had people watching me. I had to get a new phone number, block every fake account he made to get around the blocks, and keep people who knew me in the loop about him. Finally, after threatening to off me when everything came to a head, basically after I got sick of his weird, obsessive behavior, followed by homophobic rants when I called him out, he managed to call me from another unknown number and threatened to off himself if I didn't give him a chance, romantically, even though he claimed to be straight. I blocked him again, and I have no idea if he did what he said he would. Honestly, I don't want to know either. Story 22. I used to take dance lessons. My ex was so controlling, I found out he would drive past the class just after it started to see if my car was there, then check to make sure I went straight home afterward. If I went anywhere without clearing it with him first, He would go insane. This behavior started happening everywhere I went. He said it was to keep me safe, but in reality, it was because he had control issues. Even after we broke up, it continued. When I started dating another man, he broke into the house and messed with our home to try and scare my new boyfriend off. He slashed car tires and followed us to supermarkets. He was everywhere. Eventually, my new boyfriend confronted him on a street corner, and the ex finally disappeared. It took a long time before I stopped looking over my shoulder. Story 23. I am not sure if this counts as stalking, but it was definitely a form of harassment. When I was 16, I started working at Walgreens. There was a customer who kept harassing me while I was trying to work. He lived in a halfway house across from the Walgreens, a place where inmates go after prison. He started coming into the store, and it just kept getting worse. At first, he only came in when I was working the evening shift. Then, when he noticed I'd started working mornings, he showed up during the morning shift too. He never really bought anything, only once in the beginning, I think. He came into the store one day, yelled my name, and just stared at me while I was ringing up a customer. I said hello, and he told me he didn't care about my attitude and that he was going to keep coming into the store. Another time, he came in and stood right in my face for almost a minute just staring, which made me really uncomfortable. I asked, "Can I help you with something?" He kept asking over and over why I didn't talk to him anymore. His words were slurred, like he was intoxicated, and he was leaning over the register the whole time. I didn't have any personal relationship with any of the customers. I always kept things work-related. The only things I ever said to customers were "Welcome to Walgreens. Do you have a Walgreens card?" or "Have a nice day." So I wasn't sure what he was talking about. Then he said I was a grown woman, which I definitely wasn't. I was 16, going on 17 at the time. He kept coming in every time I was scheduled, and kept asking why I didn't talk to him anymore. I think there was only one time he actually bought a drink while stalking me. I asked him if he had a Walgreens card or needed a bag, but he ignored me and just asked again why I didn't talk to him. It was really frustrating. Customers saw him come in and yell things at me and asked if I was okay. He even asked a former employee about me, wanting to know if I was working that day. He kept causing scenes, always when I was on the register alone. Interestingly, he never did this when I was near another coworker, but he harassed me openly around customers, causing big scenes like we were dating or something. The last time he came in, a security guard, manager, and another employee were with me at the register having a conversation. He just walked down the aisle a bit and left after about 10 seconds. Mind you, all this happened over the course of about 5 months. I no longer work there. Story 24. It was my ex. We had been separated for a year. My friend and I were celebrating Galentine's, basically Valentine's Day for friends. She invited me to the restaurant where she worked. After her shift, we had dinner and drinks, then went to a nearby club. She posted an Instagram story and tagged my account. I didn't have my ex on Instagram, but he followed my friend, which I didn't know, and it's important to remember that. We finished up and met a mutual friend at the club. The evening went well, or so it seemed. I decided to take a break from dancing and went to the bathroom to check my phone. From another account, my ex sent me a video of me dancing with messages like, "Is this you? You know, I know a lot of people, and someone recognized you, and I recognize those shoes." I was terrified. I calmly explained the situation to my friends, and we agreed to leave. I looked around the club as we left, but I didn't see him anywhere. We went back to the restaurant, where my friend worked. I told my friends everything was fine, and that I just needed to go home. One friend left, and the other called a taxi for me and waited with me. When the taxi arrived, and we left the restaurant, my ex was there, literally waiting outside. Because my friend was a guy, my ex started a scene outside, yelling and accusing me of cheating. I never cheated on him. He cheated on me, which is why I left. It was very embarrassing. The restaurant manager even came outside to intervene and prevent him from attacking my friend. I got home safely, and the next morning, I filed a police report. It turned out he saw my friend's story, followed us from the restaurant, came into the club and took videos of me, then followed me back to the restaurant. It still gives me chills thinking about it. Story 25. When I was going to university, a girl came on to me. I told her I wasn't interested, but she didn't take it well. She figured out my schedule, what car I drove and when, where I ate lunch and when I got to campus. She sent me creepy messages like, "I can wait to run my fingers through your hair." I was really worried she might do something to me, but luckily she didn't. I transferred to a technical institute at the semester break and never saw her again. Story 26. I lived about 3 blocks from the bus stop when I was in elementary school, and sometimes my mom would forget to pick me up, so I'd just walk home. It was only 2 turns, so I knew the way and was used to the route from riding bikes with friends, so it wasn't a big deal to me. My house was considered part of the hood, so shady stuff happened, but there were lots of good people on our street who did yard work, so I felt relatively safe traveling because of all the eyes watching out. About halfway home, I noticed a white van, freaking cliché, parked on the street. I thought, okay, no big deal, just a car. Then, when I got to my street, I noticed the same van was parked a few houses down from mine. I recognized the license plate, so it was definitely the same van. That felt a little weird, too weird for me to be comfortable, so I kept walking until I reached the house of someone who would let me take strawberries from their garden. Luckily, it was only 2 houses down from where I was standing, so I wasn't in any danger of getting grabbed. I made up a story about wanting to know more about their garden. It was huge, filled their entire backyard, with pathways, cobblestone, benches and all that, and they let me into their backyard. I ate some strawberries and peeked over the backyard fence, just in time to see the white van slowly pass by where I was. Luckily, they couldn't see me, but I saw the driver. They were wearing a hat and sunglasses and had a camera around their neck. I was just a kid, so I didn't really react or fully comprehend what was happening. I just went home through the back. All the backyards were separated, but if you climbed over the back fence, there was a narrow space between a really long fence that ran down the entire street. I used that space a lot to travel between my friends' houses, and just to explore. It made for a great getaway. Later I found out on the news that kids were being kidnapped, and the kidnapper had taken bare photos of all of them. They'd found his hub, where he'd taken the photos and plastered them all over the walls. I don't know if they ever caught the guy or not. There were about a dozen children, all under 10. After that, my older siblings would walk me to and from the bus stop whenever my mom couldn't. Story 27. I've been stalked a few times, but I'll tell you about one stalker. I used to play Terra all the time when I was a freshman and sophomore in high school. I made a lot of online friends through the game, but I grew especially close to people in an 18+ guild I joined. The guild was fairly big, so naturally, little cliques formed here and there, nothing new. There was one guy who was very off. Really off. One day I logged in and immediately got a whisper from him after I said hello to everyone online. He said hello back, told me he was new, asked how my day was, just general stuff. It got weird when he became insistent on role-playing. I declined every time that day because I was very ill and just wanted to play alone before going back to sleep. But every single day after that, he kept pressuring me for roleplay. Not only that, he had a strange obsession with horses. There's nothing wrong with liking horses, but it crossed a line when it got physical in the roleplay. He'd notice when I role-played with others but not him, so he got demanding. Soon enough, I blocked him. Back then, when you blocked someone in the game, it only blocked their character. You'd see you blocked them on your screen, but their other characters could still talk to you. Basically, you had to block every character they made. The worst part? When they deleted a blocked character, the game would say you unblocked them. That's exactly what happened with this guy. I blocked him over and over, but he kept deleting his character, making new ones, rejoining the guild, and finding me. Even my alternate characters weren't safe. He found me there too. Eventually, he found my Steam, Facebook, and Instagram accounts and kept trying to contact me for 6 months. I told my guild leader, but she did nothing. I reported his characters and accounts and kept blocking him, but he kept coming back. Before he finally disappeared, he found what he thought was my address. It wasn't mine. It was somewhere in my town, but not my actual home. After that, I was very careful about where I went for about 6 more months and eventually got scared off Terra altogether. Story 28. He added me on Microsoft Network Messenger when I was 14 and pretended to be someone I knew. Eventually, he started slipping, like forgetting he gave me a fake name, and I got weirded out and stopped talking to him, eventually blocking him. He somehow got my mobile number when I was given one when I was 15 and even yelled at my father for answering one of his many calls and telling him to piss off. He then found me like 10 minutes after I created a MySpace profile. A year later, I deleted it immediately because he had a photo, and he was way older than me. I made a new one a few months later, and he found me on that. He has subsequently found me on every social media I've ever had, except this one, so I just stopped using it. To my knowledge, I've never seen him in real life, but he knows things about me. It's really weird. He has always acted like we've known each other and been close. Sometimes he messages and acts like we used to be together. From his social media that I could see without adding him, he seems to be now married with 2 kids, yet he still finds me. I last got a message on Instagram during lockdown from a fake profile he created. It's been half my life, almost. I always joke to friends that if I get offed, tell the cops to look for the bald man named Joel. Story 29. I worked at a grocery store when I was 17, doing overnight stock. They had a third-party company come in to clean during those hours. One guy from that company would constantly stare at me or find excuses to be in whatever aisle I was working in. One day, I got a random Facebook request from him, which I ignored, but then he started sending me multiple messages. It escalated when he tried to get physical with me at work. I reported it to HR, and he got fired. But after that, he started showing up every night at the beginning and end of my shift. It got so bad that I started coming in super early and leaving really late, or I'd have someone follow me to and from work, just to feel safe. Eventually, I quit because it was too much. I got a restraining order, but it didn't do much. He kept making fake profiles trying to reach me. To this day, I don't use social media. I only recently became active here because I realized there are no pictures or names involved. I still have no idea how he got my information to look me up, and that creeps me out even more. That was 9 years ago. Story 30. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years had been stalking me online and got access to some of my accounts. Don't reuse passwords across multiple accounts. Seriously. She ended up impersonating me online for years without my knowledge. She catfished people using my pictures on dating sites, created a fake Twitter pretending to be me, made an Instagram, and even hijacked my old Reddit account. I only found out when some of the people she had interacted with reached out to me and told me what was going on. Then they tried to blackmail me with the information, claiming they could convince authorities that it was actually me catfishing people. They also claimed she had asked people for money in my name, but they refused to show me any proof. I had to do a full deep clean of my online presence and confront the person who had been impersonating me. It took a long time, but I eventually got her to stop, and I managed to get the blackmailers off my back too. Be careful online, kids. Story 31. A former patient who was a severe addict started targeting me during a meltdown on the unit. They were acting out, trying to get medicated, and for some reason fixated on me rather than any of the other staff. They made the mistake of threatening to hurt me if they didn't get what they wanted, which led to them being discharged on the spot. After that, they waited for me in the staff parking lot, prompting a police call. Officers got them to leave, but unfortunately they weren't arrested at that time. The situation escalated when they kept coming around the hospital, still focused on me. They managed to get my last name from the hospital operator, and somehow even found my home address. I had a temporary restraining order in place, but the real turning point came when the police pulled them over less than a mile from my house. They admitted they were on their way to find me. Later, police informed me that they had been arrested, not only for stalking and making threats, but also for armed robbery, assault, and drug possession. While in jail, they ended up offing someone, so they'll likely never be released. To this day, I don't understand why they targeted me. I'd had very limited interaction with them before they flipped out, and nothing negative had occurred between us prior to that. Story 32. It was an ex-boyfriend. He was constantly trying to get in touch with me. After I blocked him from texting and emailing, he started driving through my neighborhood and mailing things to my house. Telling him to stop didn't work, but I mostly managed to ignore it. We had been broken up for about a year, and I hadn't heard from him in a few months when I went out of state to attend a geek convention. I parked my car in a massive lot filled with hundreds of vehicles for the weekend. When I returned, there was a very specific gift under my windshield wiper, something only he would have given me. I took him to court and requested a restraining order, but he told the judge he had simply happened to see my car and wanted to leave a gift. The judge called that reasonable and said he was probably just trying to be friendly. The previous 2 years of abuse didn't seem to matter to him at all. Fortunately, I did get a signed agreement that he would leave me alone or I would be granted a temporary restraining order. After that, I got a new phone and created new accounts with new passwords because I was pretty sure he had been accessing my messages, banking, or email to track where I was. Realizing that I hadn't heard from him because he had simply found another way to keep tabs on me was probably the scariest part. Story 33. I realized I was being stalked after a date showed me photo albums filled with pictures of me clipped from newspapers and magazines collected over the years. Things escalated when he was admitted to a psychiatric hospital after threatening to harm himself, me, and my disabled brother, because he couldn't accept that I didn't want a relationship with him. I ended up moving out of town, taking a break from my job and bringing my brother with me. I was a director at a non-profit for individuals with disabilities. We had many great volunteers, and one of them was a good guy who had always been very helpful and wonderful with the kids for years. He frequently received the Volunteer of the Year award. He was kind and nice, though a bit socially awkward, but seemed like a decent man. Over time, we became friends. Not close, but friendly. He eventually asked me out on a date, and I thought, why not? The date was okay, but I wasn't very attracted to him. We continued to keep in touch because of the non-profit. Fast forward. The guy began offering to help me with small things at my house. Thinking we were just friends, I said yes. One day he showed me picture albums, filled with newspaper clippings he had collected over the years, all featuring me. Then he started sharing the feelings he'd had for me all those years, and said he couldn't get over me. At that point, I realized there was a serious problem. I had been stalked and I had unknowingly invited my stalker into my home. I calmly and kindly told him that while I appreciated his help and friendship, I didn't share the same feelings. I also suggested he seek out a therapist because his behavior wasn't normal. I thought he understood and we parted ways as friends, or so I believed. He stopped coming to the place I worked, which was a relief. However, I did receive a message on my machine from him saying he was seeing a therapist and that maybe if he kept seeing her we might see each other again. I ignored it. Then he began showing up at my house unannounced at night, offering me money or strange things like a can of paint. He knew I was painting the inside of my house and struggling financially because I worked for a non-profit and cared for my disabled brother. I never accepted the money or the paint and politely told him thank you but no. I also warned him that he needed to stop coming over or next time I would call the police. One evening I heard noise at my back sliding door. It was him again wanting to talk. I noticed the door wasn't locked, and as I quickly moved to lock it, he shoved his way inside, refusing to leave. He followed me around the house, talking non-stop in circles about our relationship and how it's affected him, how he was seeing that therapist, and so on. I called my best girlfriend, who lived down the street, and whose boyfriend was with her. I grabbed my brother and left for their place. Of course he showed up there too, but my friend's boyfriend stood protectively in front of me and my brother. After about 15 minutes of nonsense, the guy finally left. After he left my friend's place, he went back to my house. When I arrived, I found him upstairs in my room, going through my underwear drawer. I called the police, and when they arrived, they tried to escort him out, but he resisted, punching a wall, knocking over furniture, and refusing to give up the panties. As he left, he said, "I need something to remember me by and hope you know what you've done." Sometime later, I received a call from his therapist, a woman who told me that he had been so distraught after our breakup that she was legally required to inform me. He confessed to her that he had a plan to off himself, me, and my disabled brother. She advised me to get a restraining order, which I did. She also told me he was given the choice to enter a hospital voluntarily or be taken in by the police. He spent time in the hospital, but once his 30 days were up, I lived in constant fear. I made repeated calls to have him served, and every night I'd wedge 2x4s between walls, doors, and windows, terrified he might break in. To escape the nightmare, I took a new job 45 miles away, put my house up for sale, and moved with my brother. After about a year, feeling somewhat ready to move on, I set up an online dating profile. Within weeks, I got a match. It was him, my stalker. He didn't reach out much, just sent a brief message saying something like, "You probably don't date guys like me." It was chilling but made sense. He'd always acted like he was entitled to me because of his feelings, even though there was never any real relationship. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.